We live in an era of gaming where remakes and remasters are fairly commonplace. Some of these are closer to what I would call a port, rather than being worthy of the classification new game. And at my most cynical, I call them attempts to monetize nostalgia. Others are dedicated attempts to move a classic from eras past to a modern console, and provide a chance for gamers to feel something familiar while playing an experience that is new. This remake of 1996's Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars falls into the latter camp. Launching on the 17th of November 2023 as a Switch exclusive, this game is likely to be a very popular gift for gamers both young and old this holiday season. As always seems to be the case in the Mushroom Kingdom, Princess Peach has ended up in Bowser's clutches, and Mario is tasked with rescuing her. The game begins with the Jolly Plumber running through Bowser's castle, dueling on chandeliers and seemingly defeating the big bad. But there's a twist. A giant sword impales the castle and destroys the bridge that leads to it. As a result, Mario must take the long way around while locating 7 stars that are needed to save the wishes of all those in the kingdom. While the story is very simple and straightforward, the way that it's told, putting a great deal of emphasis on physical comedy, is enduring. This game does feature written dialogue, but the story can be inferred and deduced from expressions and actions performed, just as much as it can the words on the screen. You don't need to be able to read the text to get a grasp on the situation, and that's the secret sauce of how this game delivers an admittedly short, but entertaining and accessible tale that anyone can enjoy. As this is a Mario game, what you're doing for large parts of this is jumping. Jumping to open boxes, jumping to save the game, jumping on beds for fun. Even defeating your enemies requires a good bounce or two. As Mario travels through the different locales in search of these stars, he battles monsters that try to stop him. The world utilizes 3D sets and utilizes a fixed camera position that keeps the constraints of a top-down game but shows the depth more like a modern game would. Connecting with an enemy in the world begins a turn-based battle, which sees 3 of Mario's team square off against enemies. As most turn-based battles do, you have regular attacks, special attacks, and the ability to use items. This game isn't just simply taking turns slogging each other until one party is defeated. Pressing the A button just before your attack lands gives that attack an AoE component and increases its damage. Pressing the button just before your foe's strikes hit you can result in damage mitigation and even prevention entirely. This is a very simple but very effective way to keep a player who might not normally be into turn-based combat engaged, as it's not just a case of press and wait. I'm a massive fan of turn-based games, thanks to growing up during the PS1 era of JRPGs, and even I can see the value of this mechanic, even if I'm not great at getting the timings perfect. Thankfully for those of us who can't quite get the timing right, you can use items and equipment to beef up Mario and his team, or level up the party to the cap of 30. Although you don't actually need to get much higher than 20 unless you intend to make a run at this game's endgame bosses. There are only 3 equipment slots, and most of the equipable items can be acquired from the stores throughout the kingdom, but these fit the bill in terms of giving you some flexibility. You can also purchase consumable items that can be used to heal or buff your party by using regular coins or frog coins, both of which can be found in the overworld and drop in battle. In particular, the accessories that allow you to nullify certain stats effects are very useful throughout, especially if you know what effects your foes are trying to apply. A quick note on those foes. The bosses in this game range from a collection of anthropomorphic weapons, like a claymore or a bow, to the pirate Captain Shark. These are the right level of silly to be entertaining, and their names are all the kind of painful pun that I enjoy. The regular enemies reflect some of the Mario universe's common adversaries, like Shy Guys and Boos, but there's enough diversity that this doesn't feel painfully repetitive. When each character levels up, you get a few points in each stat, and then a choice to put a few extra points. This is a simple choice of 3, physical attributes, magical attributes, or health, which further adds to this game's accessibility. You don't need to know deep or intricate leveling and min-max mechanics to be effective. Just pick whatever you like. In terms of skills, each character gets their own set, and these are archetypical. Of the 5 party members you can use, there are 2 that have healing abilities, 2 that are designed for raw physical power, and then Mario, who has a good amount of flexibility. It's worth noting that this game isn't particularly deep in terms of mechanics or side content, nor is it all that difficult. It's also not a long game either, but the crux of these issues are because this is a remake using the same framework as the original game. It took me 11 hours to get all the stars and to see the credits roll, but I can easily see that taking longer if you're more familiar with the traditional side-scrolling Mario experience than a turn-based one. If you want to beat the endgame bosses, you'll need to throw another few hours at this, depending on where you ended the main game. I saw the credits at around level 20 and got handed my first game over screen around 10 minutes into the post-game, so this is a decent step up in difficulty. There have been some enhancements here other than the obvious graphical ones, to try and move this game into this decade, and these include features like an autosave, an easier, breezy difficulty, and more animated facial expressions and character models. Graphically, this is a Switch game, and looks like it, but I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing. I actually think that this game looks very similar to another remake of a 90s game, in Atelier Marie. This aesthetic works well for these remakes, as it allows the game's models to look fresh and new, but still feel like the old top-down pixel experience when needed. In terms of performance, this runs well on the Switch, and while there are some times where I noticed the 30 FPS limit, if you're not looking for it, you aren't really going to see it. This also plays really well in handheld mode, with the natural pauses turn-based combat provides, making this a strong candidate for on-the-go gaming. Ultimately, Super Mario RPG is good. It's a refined and purposeful tune-up of a classic that entertained many throughout their childhood. While there's certainly a level of appeal here for grown-ups, there is a calculation of length to value that heavily depends on whether or not you intend to grind for a run at the post-game bosses. Unlike a lot of other Mario titles, such as Mario Strikers and Mario Kart, this is very much a single-player experience, and one that will shine on the first playthrough, but likely not offer much else on a repeat trip. I do think this is an absolute no-brainer of a recommendation if you're buying this as a present for a young gamer, and it's yet another premier title to add to Nintendo's ever-growing catalogue of excellence aimed at that demographic. If you're outside that demographic, and I indeed am, this game walks a murky grey area that will likely come down to your own very specific feelings on both Mario and what you're looking to get out of RPGs in general.